Hi everybody, welcome to Missy's Imaginings. So now that we have the ball gown done, which was a belated Christmas gift that I was able to finally get finished and get that all sewn together, I think now I just need to spend some time working on some other patterns I'd like to have ready for the Wagon Wheel Dollar Show, which will be next weekend. So I'm not sure when this video will get posted, but I have some pants and a jacket that I want to get done that's just color blocking some different kinds of denim. So we have some striped pink and blue denim and then like a floral print denim. We're going to mix it together and make a jacket. I have a cute little like denim look patchwork cotton that I like the print, so we're going to do those. Then I have some of the striped denim that I'm going to make a pair of pants. Then I have some I don't know, like a conductor print in a brown to make some pants out of that. Then I have some black with wavy polka dot stripes to do some cargo pants. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and get some pants done and this jacket done, hopefully in time for the show. So if you want just to see a few little ideas in mixing fabrics, a lot of these we've sewn before, so it's nothing groundbreaking. But yeah, so that's what we're going to do. Because all of these I'm going to use the same color thread to sew them, I'm kind of going to be sewing them just in tandem. so we're just going to kind of go through some of the steps that we always do as far as pre-sew. This I'll be doing some basting on the top shoulder edge, go ahead and serge and hem the sleeves. Then on any jacket or coat, the facing will be joined at the shoulder here. So we'll join the shoulders and then serge all the way around the entire facing and back down on the outside, because that will show in the finished garment. So I'll be getting that done and ready. Then I do have some piecing to do on the front and the back. So the front is cut at an angle, and where's my front yoke? Should be somewhere here. So yeah, the front yoke is going to be attached to the front, and so we're gonna do that, then serge that so it's nice and finished on the inside, and then top stitch it so it'll have this color for the yoke and then the print for the body of the coat. And then also on the back, and I can't remember if this back is pleated. I don't think it is. We can take a look here. Let's see if it's longer. Yeah, it looks like there's a pleat in the back. So to do a pleat, it's fairly simple. I'm going to pin from the outside and the outside and go in, and then when I get to the center, you can either have the pleat be on the inside of the coat. Let's see, we'll get here. If you want the pleat to be on the inside, then you would pinch together at the center and then just flatten it down like that to make your pleat. If you want the pleat on the outside, then you pin that down in the center and then bring these edges to where they meet like this on the inside, and then that would put the pleat dun, 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 like this, makes the pleat on the outside. I don't know if that'll show. I don't know if it will with the print. but it's kind of either way. I usually like the pleat to be on the inside so that it looks like this on a coat. So the pleat will be on the inside there. So I'll be doing that color blocking on the back to get it ready. Then these will be put together at the shoulder once those are all assembled. I have some pockets to put together, which is basically serging and hemming the straight one. I serge this edge and hem that in, and then we turn it to the right side, sew the side seams, then flip it right side out, which will make these automatically kind of turn in, and then we just sew it onto the garment on the sides, and then this will close with a flap. So I have large pockets to do for the coat, and let's see, I'm not sure if I did smaller ones. I don't see the pieces cut, so I maybe didn't. I may be just doing the big pockets on this one. Then the collar, we sew up around the top and down, flip it right side out, press it, then do this edge. You can choose to top stitch it or not. So that's kind of all the pre-sewing that I do on a jacket or a shirt, to get that done before I start actually putting the sleeves in and doing the finishing work for that. On the pants, we have some that have kind of a slanted front pocket, which is just kind of a fun, different look. And I'll have to look at my pattern because I can't remember if these have a pleat in the front as well. They might. I gotta look at my pattern. And so I'll get the pockets ready. To do the pockets, oh, I didn't even cut this one. Oh, yes, I did. Okay. It didn't want to come apart. So I'm doing the pockets. We sew right sides together on the pocket edge, then flip it to the right side, top stitch it, then the inside of the pocket will come and fold back out to form the side seam. So that's how we do a front pocket. So I'll be doing that on both of these pair of pants, and then I usually do the fly, which is serging or finishing both of these edges. Then you do the crotch stitch in the front, and then sew with right sides together, of course. Then when the right sides are sewn and the crotch is all sewn in place, it'd be like this. We want the pants to overlap from the left, so this side will lay flat and this side will fold over, and that creates the front fly opening of your pants. So this is serged, so it's a finished edge, but I like these flaps to be a little bit longer just because dolls are resin, so they're stiff. So if there's any pull or anything, I like to have enough fabric to where it's still all covered in that opening. So anyway, so we have that to do on both pair of pants, and they're kind of similar. So I think these were just a slim leg pants, no pleats or anything, so pretty basic. We'll just put those together, and then I usually will fit it on a doll as far as fitting the back dart before I put the waistband on. So yeah, all in all, pretty basic. I'll probably show a few steps here or there, but mostly just kind of relaxing and getting some sewing done. Just a quick note, when you're going to sew things together that are cut at an angle, just an idea for people who are new to sewing, when you're matching things up, what you do not want to do is to match the edge of your fabric. So we're going to pretend like we did this, and if you're familiar with the channel, you've probably seen this before, but if you're new to sewing, this is an important part of the geometry of sewing. So when you start sewing, you can feel like a geometry expert. You do not want to match the edges of your fabric when it's cut at an angle, because when you've finished your seam and you fold it up, see how that does not match up to make a straight line. So it will offset your garment. So when you're going to sew things that are cut at an angle like this, what you're going to be matching is the line where your seam allowance is. So we're going to grab a pen here and we'll get the ink started on a piece of cardboard. So if you imagine that your seam line is at 1/4 inch here, and we'll do 1/4 inch here, and I have a little bit cut off just because I was piecing odd pieces of fabric together. That seam allowance where that edge is, that's what's going to meet up with this edge of the other piece. So what's going to happen is your fabric is going to look like it's offset. So it's going to look a little wonky because you're not matching the edge of the fabric. You want to match where the seam allowance is. So now this time we're going to pin our seam allowance where we've matched where the seam will come to the edges. So that's where our seam will be. So we're going to sew that. Then when you fold it up, ta-da! Now you have a straight line. So just a hint, when you're sewing things cut at an angle, you want to keep in mind that what you're matching at is where the seam is going to be. The seam is going to go from edge to edge, not necessarily the seam allowance. So then, of course, those little bits can be trimmed off later. So yeah, just a helpful hint for anyone who's new to sewing and putting blocks together of different shapes, that you want to keep that in mind when you pin your stuff and get it ready to sew. The pants are almost finished. So once the fronts were done, then I went ahead and added the pleats if there were any, and I added the little darts in the back. Then I sewed the side seams and used the overlock machine to make that finished. Then I used the overlock seam on, or the overlock on the hem, and turned that up to hem the pants. So now on the pants, all that's remaining is to open them up, and then we sew from one ankle up to the crotch and then back down the other side to finish off the inseam. And then once the inseam is done, then we just put on the waistband. So that's all that needs to be done for both pair of pants. So they've gone together pretty quickly, and I like the fabrics that I chose. I think they're going to be fun. So yeah, so those are the two pair of pants. They're almost done there, just a little bit to finish up. Then on the jacket, we'll take a look here. So the collar is all done and prepared, and then I cut a notch here in the center back. The facing is all finished, and I also have a notch here in the center back of the neckline, and that's all finished all the way around. On the shoulder seams in both the facing and the jacket, because those seam allowances are sandwiched between the garment and the facing and won't show, I do not generally serge those seam allowances. Because they're inside, they're hidden, they don't get any wear and tear in traffic because they're going to be totally sandwiched in. So those aren't finished, they're just opened. Then on my coat, we have the yoke put together, and on the back we pressed that pleat and top stitched, and then the front, they're all done and top stitched. So on the coat, the next step will be to put in the collar and the facing. The sleeves have been prepared. I went ahead and did the 2 lines of basting, and there we go, and gathered that so that now I can just stretch this out. I'll start from side to side and work towards the center to fit this into the armhole of each side, but they're also hemmed and ready to go into the jacket. So the sleeves are prepared and they're ready to go in. So once that's done, then the only thing left for the jacket is to get these pockets ready. But I was going to show, I have the straight edge has been serged and turned over and hemmed. But when I have a curved edge like this and I want to be able to hem that, what I'm going to do is take some thread. There we go. All right. And we're going to thread a needle. Let's see if I can see the hole in my needle. There we go. Oh, I had it for a moment. Okay. Alright, so we'll tie our thread together here. And what I like to do is start, about here, I guess. And I'm just going to slip a stitch through here and anchor this. Alright, and then I'm going to just slip through what would be the seam allowance of the hem. all the way around that curve. And keep going. So how has your sewing been going? This is the first, well, these last video and this one are the first projects I've worked on really since Christmas, since we've had all that overtime. I sew for production, that's what I do for work, and I sew upholstery with heavy like faux leather textiles, which are very stiff and hard and lots of real thick batting and foam involved. So my poor little hands have been pretty worn out, but we've kind of eased off on the overtime for a bit, and so I've been able to actually get some rest for my hands. So I thought, all right, let's go ahead and start working on some of our projects again. So now that I have that slip done, I'm just going to gently start folding this in to about where I would want that to be. And it's a little bit straight on the top, but mostly just curved in the corners. So I'm going to kind of decide where I want that curve to kind of start and flatten that out. Then I'll use some pins, and probably about here, I just want that to be kind of the straight section right there in the middle, and the stripes kind of help, so I can kind of see where that will be. So we'll pin that, and I did go around that with a serger, so I'm going to have a finished edge. So when I'm done sewing the pocket closed, or making the pocket itself, by drawing that thread, give it a little bit more pull, then I can kind of pull that in and then tie this off, and that gives me a curve that's already kind of held in place by that little basting stitch. So then when I go to hem it, I'm not fighting when, let's see, which is the good side, this, okay. So if I were to just try to hem it through the machine, I'm going to be trying to take care of all this bulkiness without having real wonky corners when I want a curve. So by doing that small little basting stitch first, it gives me a better curve around the corners, and I can actually kind of work with that thread so that my corner is nice and round like that. So I'll sew the sides like this. So we'll just go ahead and do that now. We'll just line it up here, and just want to get that out of the way. And we've just got a 1/4 inch seam allowance like normal on everything. So we're just going to sew the side of the pocket on this side, and trim our blue thread out of the way. There we go. Then we'll do the same over here. Alright. So this side, okay. There we go. Then we'll go ahead and I just kind of bend that seam allowance toward one side and then flip the corner. Bend this one and then flip that corner. Now we'll flip our pocket, and there we go. Tuck out our corner there. So now you can see, since we've sewn that side seam by flipping it right side out, it naturally turns this seam allowance in, because that's what's happening on the inside of the pocket. So then I can continue to see if I need a little bit more tug on my thread to get the rounded corners where I want them, and I think that will be enough. So now I can just tie off this thread, because it's just basting, so it doesn't have to be super fancy or anything. So we can go ahead and get rid of this, get that out of the way. So now it's ready to go ahead and hem this part as well. So we'll yeah, that side was kind of wanting to be a little wonky. So now we're just going to hem that edge. And because we've basted that and pulled that corner, see how easy that is now? It's already in place. So that basting did pretty much all the placement work for me and saved me a lot of hassle on trying to hold those curvy edges down while I'm trying to sew that. And we'll take it out, and we'll trim our threads, and then trim this thread. Okay. And now our pocket is done. So that's just kind of how I like to do these, and then of course we can press it. I'll be right back momentarily here. Alright, so then before I put in the sleeves or the side seams, now I can decide where I want to place these pockets on the front of the jacket. So this is our yoke for the chest, so probably about here is where I'm going to place the pocket on each side of the front of the coat. And usually I kind of judge from the bottom and from the side, just so that my measurements are consistent. And what I'll do is I'll sew, well, we can just go ahead and put it on there, I suppose. Then I'll use my ruler to match the other side. So we'll start here. So I'm going to sew on top stitch on the very edge of the side of the pocket. Okay, back tack there. Okay, and then I'll come down to the bottom and then pivot my corner here, come across, and pivot again. And let's see, it looks like I could have went one more stitch, so I'm going to scoot a little bit over. There we go. Then come up this side. Now, when you get to this point, I do like to do a couple back tacks here, just because in case there's pull at that part of the corner. But there's a couple options here that you can have. One is if you want this pocket and you also want a double pocket, you would be finished. You would just be done. But if you just want a pocket with just this that is secure, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a stitch past that top edge of the pocket so that I'm not sewing on this front part of the pocket, but right next to it. And I'm going to sew the back of the pocket down to the bodice of the coat. And then we'll pull that out and trim off our threads here and here, as well as on the inside. And our pocket is now secure, so there is no pocket back here, it's only this pocket. Then I'll sew a snap here and here to hold that down so that my pocket will be finished. So that's how I do the pockets and put them on the front. So I'll do the other side. And then to insert the collar and the facing, I will take my collar, and I've already notched the center back. Now I'm going to notch across the bottom to that stay stitching that I did. This just gives more flexibility to the actual seam line. Then I'm also going to snip, and you can stay stitch around the neckline as well, which I probably will do as well. Just haven't got that far yet. But I will snip, snip my seam allowance around the neckline. And this will look very familiar if you've been to the channel very much. So what that will do is, now when you open that out and you want to have a straight line, it's easier because all of that space will separate as you try to open that curve. And that way you can try to like fool your machine that your machine thinks you're just going to sew in a straight line. So then I will start at the center back and pin in my collar, and then I will snip this just like we did the neckline of the coat. And this side as well. Now this side. There. That looks about right. Okay, so now I'm going to sandwich the collar between the right side of the bodice of the coat and the right side of the facing. So now I'll line up the center back of my facing as well. Make sure my pin gets in there. And then I'm just going to bring the collar up to the raw edge. We'll open out that seam allowance in the bodice of the coat. And we'll bring the collar edge up to that raw edge so that all the raw edges are flush. So that's the goal. So here we have this part. And your test can kind of be to make sure that your shoulder seams line up with the bodice of the coat as well as the fabric of the facing. So we line up our seams there, and we bring that collar up flush to the raw edge. And we can kind of bring this, there we go. Okay, line up our shoulder seam and tuck a pin in there. Now when we get to this edge of the collar, this is always my precaution, is I have a pin that I want to put, about a 1/2 inch 5/8 away from the edge of the collar. So let's get that one in place. And we're kind of pulling our garment down away from where the seam line will be, because we don't want any pleats in our garment. So we're at the same time we're kind of pulling that down and away so we don't have any pleats. Now with the collar, if you can see how that raw edge of that collar, it's going to want to pull down because your neckline goes this way, but your collar's curved this way, so that it'll go around the neck once it's all put together. So it's very important that you make sure that the very edge or tip of this collar is up flush with the raw edge of your fabric of your garment, because if that pulls down, we'll do for example here, once you sew it, a lot of times that will pull out and you'll be able to see that raw edge. So it's really important when you pin to get that raw edge at the end of the collar all brought up evenly with the raw edge of your fabric, because you don't want that sliding out of the seam on the right side of the garment. So usually I will put my pin in, and then I don't want to catch the tip of my collar in the front seam. So once I have it pinned where I want it, I'll just bend that collar tip out of the way, and then when I pin the front edge, I know I've moved that collar out of the way so it won't get caught in this front seam. So there's the front edge of our jacket. We'll pin here and continue down towards the hemline. Alrighty. And if you've watched the channel much, you've probably seen me do this several times. So it's not new if you've been here for a while, but if you're just kind of experimenting on how to sew, then this might be new and good information for you. And this one doesn't come all the way down to that little sliver of fabric. It's okay. It's going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It'll be fine. So now when I sew, I'm going to sew this edge of the facing, then I'm going to come up the front of the jacket, then I'll continue and follow that process on the other side. I'll go all the way around the neckline, down the other side of the front, and then across the bottom of the facing on that side as well. So that's what I have to do to get the collar all put in. And while I'm sewing, I'm careful to make sure that my fabric is gently pulled away that direction from the seam that I'm sewing, because I don't want any pleats in my fabric. And the facing isn't quite as important, of course, as the bodice. So once I have it all pinned, a lot of times I start with the jacket on the top so that I can see what my fabric is doing, and I can make sure that I'm not sewing any pleats in where it might get kind of tight. And usually, because we've pinned according to our seam allowance, right where the seam allowance will go, which is 1/4 inch, I'm not seeing any pleats there. It might want to pleat lower, but as long as there's no pleats on that seam line, then it's going to be fine once your garment is sewn in, like your collar sewn in, and you turn it out. So around the corners especially, it's important to make sure all that fabric is pulled away from where your seam line is going to be. So I'll do that on the jacket, finish out the other pocket, and then put the sleeves in, and we'll be about done. Here are our finished products. Well, almost finished. There's still the closures to put on them. But here is our jacket with our little pockets and how the front looks. Then we'll flip it over. Here's how the back looks. pull out the shoulders a little bit there. Then on the inside, we have the facing, so it looks nice and finished on the inside as well. Then I always take the shoulder of the facing and tack it to the shoulder seam on the inside, so it helps hold that facing in place. So there's our facing, looks nice. So yeah, there's our little jacket, and then we have our pair of pants that will go with it, or they can be separate, I guess. So yeah, and these don't have a pleat, but they do have the inset pocket on the front. Then we have our second pair of pants. So these have the longer line on the front pocket, just a little bit different style. And then these do have double pleats in the front. So once that's closed up, we have double pleats right there in the front of the pants. And then they each have darts in the back, just to kind of tighten that up. So yeah, that's all we kind of did today. So not too exciting, but hopefully if you just kind of wanted a little refresher on making some pants or putting together any of the jacket style patterns or shirt style patterns on the website, this was helpful for you. Something a little relaxing, just to kind of let something play, and yeah, kind of sew along if you want. Here is a look at the finished product on the doll. The only thing I did not end up doing was putting snaps on the flaps of the pocket. I might still do that, but I don't know. I think it'll be okay. It's just a lot of handwork to do snaps. But we'll take a look at the jacket here. The buttons go, or snaps go, all the way up to the collar. And those buttons are sewn on the left side, so that when it overlaps from the left and the snaps are fastened, the appearance would be that the buttons are coming through on the overlapped fabric, even though actually these are just sewn on to the fabric because they're not real buttons and buttonholes. So yeah, so we have the little bead buttons on the jacket and on the pockets, and then also a couple on, oh, does that not want to focus? We'll give it a second here, but also on the little ends of the sleeves, there's a couple little bead buttons. So that's how the garment looks. This is a 66 centimeter Miro doll body with a head sculpt by the artist from Italy, Huli Dolls, on Instagram and Etsy. So if you really like realistic looking sculpts, that's who sculpted this face. And so yeah, and then the pants, of course, match the jacket, so that we have the long pants on our long-legged fella here. And I just like the way the white shoes looked. So there we go. That's the finished outfit. So if you are interested in putting this together and mixing it up a little bit with some color blocking, it's just some ideas that you can do. You can kind of do it any way you want, but anyway, there's just a fun way to use up some scrap fabric and end up with a really fun look. So yeah, I just thought I'd pop this in at the end. Thanks so much for coming along and watching the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.